Okay, so welcome to today's discussion on active and passive reading comprehension. I know you're focused on the GMAT. If any other students show up, they may be doing the GRE as well. GRE and GMAT reading comprehension in some ways is not all that different. So a couple things to keep in mind is that in both of them it's going to be probably about a third of the test or so. So let's just kind of like jot these things out. Reading comps. On the GMAT, they're probably going to be, it depends. There may be 3 short and 1 long. Occasionally it's going to be 2 short and 2 long. And we are going to focus mostly on kind of the long passage reading comps for this one here. I think we'll do a 1 GMAT and one GRE because the approach that we're going to talk about is more applicable to to kind of these longer passages. When you're dealing with shorter passage reading comprehensions or critical reasoning, there's some other approaches. So let's see. The GRE. 1, maybe 2 long passages. One long passage per section. All right. Okay, here's the thing. Reading comprehension tends to be something that people often take for granted. And they take it for granted because, generally they'll be, more or less comfortable reading. All right. And the thing is, when you take something for granted, you can tend to kind of lose sight of what you're actually looking for, right? And it's very easy to kind of zone out and end up kind of trying to take things in passively rather than actively, all right? So you end up getting bored because usually the content is not going to be something that you're particularly interested in, right? I mean, you may be an authority on some particular subject. That sometimes happens, but very often it's going to be something if you're business centric, maybe it'll be something on biology, right? Or maybe it'll be something on humanities from the 18th or 19th century, something that you may or may not be familiar with. If you're not familiar with it, it's easy to zone out. So the thing that you need to do is figure out how to approach reading comprehension questions in a way that will allow you to not zone out. So what you want to do is read them actively. So what do I mean by actively? You basically want to treat it like a puzzle or even like a math problem. So for example, when you're doing something in the quantitative section, this is true for, whether it's the GRE or the GMAT or, one of the high school tests, right? Like the SAT or the ACT. You look at something, you see triangles and circles. You're like, okay, well, this is a puzzle that I need to solve. How am I going to solve it? You have some strategies, some approaches for solving it. You need to approach a reading comprehension question the same way, that there are things that you're actively going to be looking for, all right? And when you find them, it can make the question a lot easier to answer because generally the approach that the test writers have come up with has not changed all that much in the past, several decades, right? Oops. So in other words, most reading comp questions are quite similar. All right. So what are the things that you're going to be looking for and what's your approach? So here's the general strategy. When you're taking a look at a reading comprehension question, usually there are some exceptions. Usually I recommend read the entire thing first. There are some exceptions. If you find that you are, that you're not a fast reader, that it takes you a really long time to get through a passage. Occasionally there are times when you want to jump to the questions first, but those are exceptions. In general, if you find that you are generally kind of, getting through passages and getting through a practice section in the normal amount of time, go ahead and read the passage first. But here's the thing, when you read the passage, you want to extract certain information. You don't want to just, lay back and kind of let the entire thing sort of, kind of filter in. you want to kind of ask yourself questions as you're going through. All right. That's what I mean by reading actively. Okay, so what are we going to be looking for? There's a few things. The first thing that you want to keep in mind is that you are really being tested more than anything else on kind of the structure of a passage more than the details. Now, the questions might ask you about details, but you can figure that out, when you're ready to answer the questions. When you're actually reading through, it's not so important to retain the details. Structure is more important than details. All right. Now, what do I mean by structure? Well, the first element of structure is the logical flow of a passage. All right. So without even worrying about content at all, you want to know the way in which the passage is structured. And both GRE and GMAT questions are going to be somewhat similar. All right. So when I talk about logical flow, how is the passage organized? What did, is it something like, is it like a, thesis, proposal, analysis, conclusion, right? Is it, say, hypothesis and discussion? Is it, point, counterpoint? How is it being, what's the logical flow? How is it being organized? And when you're actively reading, you want to look for kind of triggers in the reading comprehension passage that kind of, tell you how that might be set up, right? So you might look for things that say something like, okay, my proposal states this, right? Or scholars have argued this, right? Or however, a counterargument may be this, right? Something like that. You want to look for kind of language that is independent of the content itself, but that kind of tells you how the thing is set up, what the author is actually doing, all right? So that's the logical flow. That's kind of the first part of structure that you're going to be looking for. So if you're reading through, even if you don't get any details, it's important to know what that setup is. That's part of active reading. The second part of structure is going to be the main content. And when I talk about main content, that is really, what's it about? And generally, there's kind of two layers to this that you're going to want. One is the entire passage level, and the level of each paragraph. All right. Now, if you're doing a GRE, it's like, you may have scratch paper that you can, jot a couple of things down. If you're doing the GMAT, you may use the whiteboard to kind of, flag a couple of things. You want to be able to kind of summarize in probably maybe 2 or 3 words per paragraph, what's going on, what it's all about. Now, again, this is not about detail. This is just about what's where. All right. You might find yourself doing an outline or a passage map. Some people do, some people don't. You might take a similar approach that you might use for the, the GRE or the GMAT essay. If you take notes, keep them to a minimum. Don't spend a lot of time on notes. Just, jot down a couple of things. But so when you're looking for structure, when you're actively reading, it's like, okay, what am I looking for? I'm looking for this logical flow, and I'm looking to extract the main content. If I were to come up with a title for this passage, what would it be, right? That's the kind of stuff that you're trying to answer at this level. All right. The next thing that you're looking for, in this kind of active reading approach is, and let's boldface this and make it a different color, actually. So boldface, and let's make it blue. Okay, that's the first thing that you're going to be looking for. Second thing you're going to be looking for, again, think about active reading, is tone. Oops. Okay, what do I mean by tone? Well, when I'm talking about tone, this is really about, what is the author's voice, all right? And you might keep in mind who, tone and audience can come into play here as well. But tone's a big one. What is the author's voice? So by tone, what is kind of the, hold on 1 second. I have some trouble with the whiteboard here. There we go. Okay, is the author pro? Is the author con? Is the author neutral? All right. Now, these are kind of the big three, the big obvious ones. Like, the author is either going to be a big advocate for something, or the author might be a critic of something, or the author might be some sort of an academic. But at the graduate level that you're going to be dealing with here, whether it's a GMAT or a GRE essay, reading comprehension question, there's going to be more nuance, right? So it's not just going to be pro, con, or neutral, right? So is the author kind of a strong or a mild advocate, right? Strong or a mild critic, right? Academic, satirical or mocking, ridicule, praise, contemplative, right? What is the tone of the person who's actually writing this thing? So that's something to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out kind of like what the author may or may not be advocating for. All right. This is the kind of thing that you can, with the active reading approach, you want to go through and look for words that are going to be signals, right? That will kind of, clue you in. So if the author says something like, I fiercely advocate something, right? Or I condemn, right? Or things like that are going to be strong language, which can give you a sense of kind of what the entire tone of the passage is going to be. Okay, that's the next one. The next thing that you want to consider when you're reading is scope. All right. Any idea of what I might mean by scope? I'll ask you this directly.
So I think by scope, you would mean like what is the reach of that content? Like not able to describe it, but
Yeah, basically. I mean, that's the idea of the scope. You can also think of it in terms of scale, right? So scope and scale is like like how broad, how narrow, kind of what's the kind of like how all encompassing are we talking about, right? The example that I often give is something like this: broad, narrow. Um, the example that I sometimes give is say there's a hypothetical passage about let's say the development of automobiles in the 1920s and its contribution to the rise of American suburbs. All right, say the passage is about this. Okay, so one of the questions might be like, what's a good title for this, for this passage? And one option, something that's too broad, would be like, the history of cars or transportation. No, too broad, right?
correct.
Would it be about say something like carburetors? I don't know, carburetors. Can't spell. In early Ford cars. No, too narrow, right? It's about cars and its contribution to to suburbs, right? So you want to be aware that the scope of this is important. The scope of the question and the answer choice and the corresponding part of the passage all need to match up. So you don't want something that's going to be kind of like, asking you about paragraph 2 and looking for your answer in paragraph 3, right? Or you don't want something that's going to be passage wide and have, and have like the right answer be, passage, paragraph specific. You want to make sure that the scope matches up. Okay, so we got tone, scope. The next is point of view, which, well, yeah, I guess I can go anywhere. Now, because you're at the graduate level here, point of view is going to be much more complicated than just the author's perspective. All right. And in most, or pretty much all of the essays, there may be some exceptions, but in most of the reading comprehensions, you're going to see several different points of view. And you need to be able to identify what those are. All right. Obviously, there's going to be an author's point of view. Or the narrator if it's something, literary, right? But there's going to be other points of view as well, right? There might be conventional wisdom. All right. And when you're doing this active reading approach, you want to go and look for kind of, trigger words and phrases that will tell you what those points of view might be. So, for example, if you have something to the, so something like, traditional beliefs have held that X, but I think that Y. Well, so instead of, so then the author believes Y, but we also have a point of view of X. So you need to know kind of who has which one. All right. Conventional wisdom. Also kind of supporting or countering arguments. So you could find, say 3 to 5 points of view in a passage. And one way in which they will try to misdirect you in the answer, the answer choices, the wrong answer choices, is by applying someone else's point of view to, and trying to like attribute it to, to the wrong person, something like that. So you want to be aware of those. Okay. Okay, so those are kind of like in general what you're going to be kind of, what you're looking for as you're reading a passage. If you, can kind of identify these things, you will be well on your way to getting to getting a lot of these things right. All right. Again, save the details for when you're ready to answer the questions. All right. If you happen to kind of pick up some details along the way, great. You want to kind of know where they are. So we'll say, know where details are, but not necessary to retain all of them. Let the question guide you. We'll do a couple of samples in a minute here. Okay. Next aspect of active reading that you're going to want to look for is kind of know where you might be most likely to find answers to these things. All right. What types of sentences are you going to be more likely to focus on? So let's go to another column for that. Which sentences tend to be important? Now, obviously, you can say like, any sentences are going to be important depending on how the thing is set up. But in general, read the introduction. Not all paragraphs are going to have, are going to be multi-paragraphs, but, you'll generally kind of know where the intro is because, supposedly it's going to open with it, right? So read your introduction and then look for things like the thesis. Let's say topic sentence. That's going, to kind of establish where things are, and thesis, right? You're not always going to have a thesis statement at the end of an introduction. You sometimes will, maybe not, but you want to kind of look for what this thing is about, all right? And it's usually going to be stated at the beginning, maybe not, usually at the end of an intro paragraph. There, again, not always. But at this level, at kind of the graduate level, you want to kind of, you've had a lot of practice in kind of, identifying what a thesis is, right? And a thesis is basically where you outline what the thing is going to do. All right. So topic, sentence, and thesis. And then, of course, conclusion. Where, and again, not every paragraph is going to have a conclusion. I mean, some are going to just kind of cut off in midstream. But you want to be aware whether or not you actually have something that builds up to a conclusion. Often you will. All right. Then you also want to read the opening and closing sentences in each paragraph. Because again, from a structure perspective, that's going to tell you kind of where things are. All right. And then you want to look for kind of loud words. What do I mean by loud words? Words that jump out at you. So these might be like, direction changers, right? Like, however, despite, although, right? They could be direction, same direction, right? Things like furthermore, moreover, indeed, right? You want to be aware of things like that. You want to look for words that that might give you a hint of tone, right? Words like strong words like condemn, right? Congratulate, appreciate, optimistic, pessimistic, whatever, things like that. Things that kind of give you a sense of, as to kind of where the author might be going. All right. So that's kind of a, general sort of introduction to kind of, as kind of what you want to look for, what you want to extract as you're going through. And obviously we've taken like a long time to kind of talk about this because, this is, it's a course, right? But the thing is, you're going to be doing this in just a matter of a couple of minutes, right? If you're dealing with a GMAT, a GMAT passage, you'll want to do maybe say 8 minutes total for the question and and 4 answers, maybe 6 minutes for one with three questions. So in general, you want to try to keep your passage reading under 4 minutes. And you do this by extracting the important data and knowing what it is that you kind of leave aside until you're kind of ready to get there. All right. So I'm going to start with, I'm an archaeologist, so I'm actually going to take a look, first of all, at an archaeology passage. I'm not going to do questions associated with this, maybe one or two, but I just wanted to kind of take a look at this passage in terms of, this kind of active reading approach. So let me bring this into the screen here, and I will make it large so that you can see it. Okay, here's what I want you to do. And then you notice up there's, yeah, okay. I want you to take maybe about a minute, and I want you to read the first 3 paragraphs, all right? The first 3 paragraphs, from archaeology as a profession down to where it says practically you are wrong. All right, give yourself about maybe we'll do 2 minutes actually. All right, and I'm going to stop recording, and then we'll come back to this in a minute, and then we'll talk about it. All right.
Can you increase the size of the fonts a little bit? It's still
yeah.
quite.
How's this?
Yeah, now better, quite better.
Even like that. Okay, so just the first 3 paragraphs.
Yeah, just okay, fine with me. Yeah.
Okay.
The scientific value. So he says through this he is justifying that his method that he suggests would be the good one.
Yeah. So you've gotten a lot out of it. I mean, it sounds like just from reading this, you retained a lot. All right. So and then in terms of like scaling it down, I mean, I mean, you've pretty much kind of summed up everything in the in these paragraphs, and then to kind of like sort of whittle it down just to I mean. When you're doing active reading, it's like, what do you need? Well, 2 problems, which you cited, right? Okay. First, that's a keyword, right? It tells you where it is. You talk about the monetary issue, right? The supports of the poor. Okay, that's the first one. First is problem 1. Okay, right? And then this just gives you more information, right? So I'll put a little plus there. That only paltry sums are available. That's gives you more information about problem 1. But we don't even really need to know that much until we're actually asked about it. Okay, so problem 1 is money. Okay, fine. Again, you've identified all of this. And then problem 2, illegal excavation and looting, right? Okay, so there you go. Problem, that's 2. All right, so that's essentially, that's all you need. Essentially, you've got the thesis right here, right? It's like, okay, we're laying out the problems. Well, I guess the thesis is more of a proposal than a thesis. Okay, and then the proposal comes here, right? Okay, again, which you've identified. Things to keep in mind. Are there any? We talked about tone before. What are some words that might offer a clue as to the author's tone here?
I think this outrageous word is a very strong word.
Yeah, that's a really strong word. Why do you think it's being used?
He's making his own suggestion outrageous. So, it is out of the box. Maybe some very negative idea kind of he's suggesting. Seems like he thinks.
Well, does he think it's outrageous, or he or she?
Yeah, the author thinks it is outrageous. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like what he's doing here, I mean, like he's using outrageous as a rhetorical device, right? Because this person is obviously making a proposal, that this archaeologist, I for the record here, I'm an archaeologist as well, and I do not agree with the proposal. That's okay. But so I mean, this person is saying outrageous to basically anticipate a response, right? It's like, okay, I know that you guys are going to think this is nuts. I'm acknowledging that. Right? So it's kind of it's a rhetorical, it's kind of a way of preempting potential objections. It's like, yeah, I know you think this is crazy. Hear me out. Listen to what I've got to say, right? And that's what that's doing. And that's kind of a sign that the author is clearly going to agree, it's clearly going to be, behind this proposal, right? There's another, let's see, is there anything else? Oh, well, okay. I mean, another clue as to the the tone is I would propose, right? That tells you exactly what this is. That's a proposal, right?
Yeah.
So we're basically we're laying out, so this is structured, basically as a regular academic proposal where you're kind of laying out the problem, right? Laying out the problem. I remember how we were talking about kind of structure in terms of logical flow. We've got problem identification here. We've got proposal here, right? What's a proposal? Okay, I'm proposing that we allow duplicate artifacts to be sold on the open market. Okay, and basically saying what it's going to do. So here's the author is outlining here and why. Now here's the anticipation of counterargument, right? Anticipation. I should have used the text box. That's all right. Potential counterarguments. Oops. Well, what's counterarguments? Right? You might object. All right. So there's a lot of kind of rhetorical kind of posturing that this author is doing. Right? It's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to raise something. Everyone's going to think it's crazy. There's also an element of condescension here. See this practically, you are wrong. This writer's pretty arrogant, right? You've also got this, you've got this, I agree, more this anticipation, right? So clearly the author has this proposal that he or she knows is going to be well beyond the bounds of what is normally accepted practice, but the author's being pretty arrogant about it. So these are kind of, also you got sort of this theoretically you may be correct. So these are things that you want to look for, even if we don't retain all of the details, right? So, we don't necessarily need to know about kind of this stuff about the highest bidder, about kind of how illegal excavation works, governmental authorities. You don't need that until you're actually referred to that particular point. What we do need to know is that this is a proposal by somebody who is clearly, committed to this idea, but anticipating some pretty strong objections, right?
Correct.
And that's kind of what active reading is. So you want, and again, we're spending a lot of time talking about it, but when you're actually doing it in practice, you're going to do this pretty quickly, because things are going to jump out. Words that are going to jump out are outrageous, and you might object, and practically you are wrong. And that's going to tell you exactly where the author is coming from and what the author is doing. All right. Now let's see. I'm actually going to move off of this. I'm not actually going to do questions about this particular example. I'm going to go to another one for the GRE folks who might tune into this later. Same approach. I'm going to move over to the left side here. Oops, 1 second. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing, same active reading approach for this one here. Again, questions in the GRE and the GMAT, the content related ones are usually quite similar. Sometimes I find that the GRE one is a little bit more nuanced, whereas I find that the nuance in the GMAT is sometimes relegated more to the critical reasoning side of things. But in general, I mean, reading comprehension is reading comprehension. So this approach is going to work on both.
So what do you mean by nuance, Steve? What do you mean by nuance when you say it is nuance?
Nuance?
Yeah, correct.
What do I mean by it? Nuance is basically, when I talk about nuance, is you want to look very carefully for shades of meaning. Because things are often not going to be, either black or white or very obvious one way or another. You want to kind of look for, you want to look for kind of for example, when you're, usually in the answer choices, you'll be able to narrow down maybe, you might be able to rule out 2 or 3 immediately, but you'll find that you might be struggling between one or another, right? Because one might be close, but not quite there. So that's what I'm talking about. You want something that's going to directly answer the question and not be off by some shades of some shades of gray. All right. Okay, we're going to do the same thing that we did for the last one. I'm going to pause the recording and I'm going to have you read this entire passage about F.W. Maitland, and again about maybe I'll give you about 2.5 minutes. All right.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Second, I'll pause the recording. Oops.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do this time. I'm going to go kind of jump right into kind of the active reading approach. All right. Tell me first of all, kind of in general, what you got out of it, like we did last time.
Yeah. So first of all, he says there is an author, historian Maitland. So he's not the author. So historian Maitland observed that legal documents are evidence for the economic and social history of a given period. Then he says for the non-criminal civil law, not much focus has been there from historians. And
Mm-hmm.
then he probably gives the reasons for that. Maybe that one reason is that that subject is complex, but then he counters saying that it is not that. The criminal law is similar to that. Then another possible explanation for less focus on civil is that many people were not involved in England, were not involved in civil law. But then he counters it saying that many shopkeepers, it was not only elite, lot of population, both men, women, everyone was in the civil litigations in this era.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think you've got a good handle on kind of the the extraction here. And then again for the for the purposes of the course, kind of like going in, so basically you've got your topic sentence right there. You're raising a question, right? And then proposing the the two potential explanations. So here's explanation two, right? One reason, right? So there's number one. There's number two. That's the way you want to, now, what's interesting here is that we don't actually have a conclusion. This is not building to a conclusion. This is weighing a couple of different explanations, right? He's raising first of all, the one saying that's too complex. But wait, that doesn't, that doesn't work, right? Because he's saying, well, the complexities are not actually different, so that wouldn't address the question. And then the other one is that maybe it wasn't applicable to to the masses. But he's saying, well, that's not true because it actually is. Recent research, right here is showing that civil litigation does involve a whole wealth of individuals, right? Artisans, merchants, farmers. It's not just the elite, right? And then he offers another reason why his proposal two, again, those words like moreover are helpful, right? So actually, not only was it applicable, but there was a huge increase in it in the 16th century, right? So he has not answered the question. All right. The question has not been answered, which is fine. Presumably it might be answered, in the actual text somewhere else, if you find look on Google. But this is basically an academic weighing of different options, right? We got the topic sentence, we've got the, it's like, well, okay, why is this the case? Okay, option one, option two. Let's take a look at a couple of the questions associated with this. One question I'm gonna see.
And there are many point of views, Steve, in this passage, and very difficult to actually take it from one go. Like whose opinion is where? Somewhere Maitland opinion, somewhere author, somewhere general research opinion.
Yeah, well, so let's see what's going on here. All right, so we've got Maitland's observation. That's point of view one, right? Okay, so that all right. Now Maitland, and now a lot of people will make the mistake and kind of attribute, kind of assume that Maitland is sort of the author or the narrator, but no, that's not true, right? So we've got Maitland's point of view. So let's kind of lay these out. All right, so point of views. One is Maitland. All right, so what is Maitland's point of view? Oh, okay, Maitland is basically saying that well, that legal docs are only evidence, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, that's one point of view. Okay. Narrator though is saying narrator point of view. questions, right? Why is it so difficult to trace criminal law? Sorry, civil law, right? That's the narrator's point of view. And the proposed, right? Okay. Now the narrator is not necessarily proposing the questions. Well, the narrator. Okay. Well, let's take a look here. Okay. Maitland is also offering the the first
One of the reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So Maitland's offering kind of one potential, solution as to why, right? But the author's questioning this, right? And one potential reason, right? Availability.
The second potential
Or
reason
if it's
is
more complex.
common wisdom. Common wisdom.
Pardon me?
I was saying that second reason he is given as common wisdom.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah. So I mean, yeah. So there are a few points of view here. You've also got another one, which is the recent research point of view, right?
Correct.
Right. So the recent research is basically saying that that the civil law was actually applicable, right, to a whole to a wide range of society, right?
Correct.
Or employed by wide range of groups. All right. So you've got a few different points of view here, right? Okay. Okay, then we've got this moreover, and that's a little bit tricky because you want to figure out whether the moreover here in line 23, okay, does that apply to the recent research or does that apply to the author's point of view? It looks like it applies to the recent research, so it's a little bit ambiguous. Yeah, that's a little bit ambiguous, so you might want to kind of pay close attention to that. That's kind of where nuance comes into play because it's not completely clear if if this is the author's opinion. It looks like it's more associated with the recent research, right? Let's go take a look at a question here. Number 9.
Suggest.
We'll see how kind of active reading can help us out with those questions. Now we know from the passage that just from a little bit of kind of extracting kind of key data points tells us how we've got more access to criminal law than we do to civil law, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So now let's look kind of misdirect. Well, let's scope actually applies here a lot. All right, is more relevant to general social history. That is really broad. Right? C is super broad.
Okay.
So I would be careful with that one. I'd rule that one out. Okay. Has been studied more thoroughly by historians? Maybe, because you'd think if they do have access to it, there's a good chance they'll be studying more, for thoroughly. So maybe we'll keep that in. Is more intellectual interest to historians and their readers? Well, we're not talking about what's more interesting. We're just talking about what they've got more access to. This is a good example of misdirection. They might find it very interesting, civil law, but they just haven't had access to it. All right. Okay. A lot of people guess E. Here's the thing about E. It doesn't necessarily say that it isn't more complex, right? What does it say about the complexity?
Yeah,
Right?
because the author says that yet complexities that confront are the same. So we cannot say that they differ in complexity because author says the same.
Yeah, so here's the problem, and here's where points of view matter. Maitland might potentially make that argument, right? Yeah, so we're trying to figure out, okay, so, what's the difference? Okay, Maitland is saying, well, maybe the subject, requires history, to master an extremely formal system of pleading and procedure. Okay, but the author's saying, well, wait a minute. That doesn't actually seem that much different from the other,
Correct,
right?
correct, correct.
So the author is saying, well, wait a minute. The author is countering Maitland here. So E would be if Maitland were potentially right. But the thing is, the author is saying that Maitland is not right, so that would rule out E. So E is a Maitland point of view, which we want to rule out because we want, the passage point of view. When they say the passage suggests, they mean what's the author's perspective, not somebody in there. Okay, has been more. All right, so B is in the running. D is kind of irrelevant. Involves the study of a larger proportion of the population. They're trying
This
to
is out of
misdirect.
scope.
Yeah, D
Yeah,
is
this is out of scope because comparison is not given between both. Like
right,
this.
exactly. And one way in which they're trying to trick you there is because they actually mention, they mention like a large proportion of the population down here, but that's not in that context, right? It's a misdirection. So I'd rule out D. So best answer is B, which is really, which kind of goes without saying when you think about it. It's like, well, if you've got more access to it, of course you got to study it more.
But is it given somewhere in the passage? I could not comprehend if this was given. Though by elimination we are able to get through this Steve.
Say this again?
But is the passage implying this thing? It has been studied more thoroughly by historians.
Well, okay. I mean, it may not say it in those specific words, right? But it's like you can kind of make that inference, So the author's taking Maitland's statement here as fact. It's like, okay, this is the only available evidence of it. Why does it take it so long to focus on civil? So if it's taking so long to focus on civil, obviously they focus more on criminal. See, so that is answering the question right there.
Okay, okay.
See? So again, when it says the passage suggests, it may not be the exact wording, but it's going to be in there. You don't really need to draw an inference, right? But you may need to kind of look around the wording to see what it's actually saying.
Correct. You are right, Steve. It actually makes that point. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's look at. Let's see. Let's look at the last two, and then we'll wrap up. All right. Okay. 10. The author of the passage mentions the occupations in order to what? All right. Okay, so first of all, active reading. Now, remember I said don't worry about details. Yeah, you shouldn't be worrying about details, but when you do this active reading approach, you will kind of recognize that somewhere in the latter half of the passage, it starts talking about actual people, right? And the people that it's talking about is this group of people right there, right? So you can know it's down. Yeah, so you might be like, oh yeah, I can't remember exactly where it is, but I know it was somewhere down towards the bottom, right? And then you'll go there and you'll look at those people to figure out why are they being mentioned.
So basically, he was telling that historian's assumption is not correct. So first one is opposite actually.
Say this one more time.
So he was saying this to counter historians' incorrect assumption.
Yeah, exactly.
So first one is opposite.
Yep. So what would be the best answer that hits that?
So I have not read it. Just give me 1 second.
Which one? Or
so I am just going through. I have not gone through the options. Just
okay. Yeah, take your time.
I think it should be C, Steve.
Okay, C. Let's see. All right. So that we would need. All right. It's not really comparing the ordinary citizenry to the elite. It's not doing either one. It's just basically saying, hey, there used to be an argument that all walks of society did not use these procedures, but it turns out that they did, right? But it's not necessarily countering how much these are being used with respect to the elite, right? They're trying to misdirect you by kind of using both of those in the same area. But a better answer would be something a bit more general like D, which is saying, wait a minute, look at there's been an argument that people didn't use the system, but yeah, they did, right? So what's being countered is not, it's not the fact that, like whether or not the general citizenry used it more or less than the elite, but that they used it, period, counter to previous claims that they didn't.
Agree, Steve. So actually, we have to go back and read that line properly. Otherwise, we falter if we go by memory.
Yeah, and what I would recommend for these kinds of things, when you're going back, whenever you do a detailed question, you want to go back and look because, again, the details may not have come through entirely when you're taking this active reading approach. All right. So always read maybe a sentence or two above and below the actual location to see. So I might read for kind of maybe take it from here down to maybe down to here or something like that. Like read the general area. It'll take you another few seconds, but at least you'll really get the whole thing in context.
Steve, one thing, if you go back to that line, but recent research suggests that civil litigation during the period involved this, and not merely narrow property male elite. So, isn't it saying that thing that I was saying? So I just remembered this. That is why I answered this. But isn't
Sorry, you cut out there for a second.
Yeah. So, Steve, I'm trying to say if you read this line number 20, but it is showing a comparison between general public and the elite, not merely when he's saying that. He's showing a comparison if you see.
But it's not really saying.
I don't know. It is confusing.
Yeah, right. Okay, but it's not comparing. Okay. Well, see, that's where the misdirection comes in. So even though they're talking about both at the same time, it's not comparing one to the other. It's not saying which one is more or less than the other. It's just saying, oh, don't just focus on the elite because a wide range of society also used this. That's where the misdirection comes in. Because when you look at that answer choice, it says counter the claim that they reveal more about a country's ordinary citizens than about the elite. It's not drawing that comparison.
I agree, Steve.
Yeah,
so
that's where. Yeah, so that's where what I was talking about nuance before. It's so the thing is, if you narrowed it down between say C and D, C might be close, but then you're like, wait a minute, that comparison's not exactly what they're drawing here.
Agree, Steve. So you have to verify every word and then only answer.
Exactly. Why don't let's do one more, and then we'll wrap it up. If I have it here, hold on one second. If I don't have it, then we'll wrap it up here. And I don't think I copied it in. Did I? No. Okay. Sorry. It was just wait. Wait a second.
You have this 11th question there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see. Number 11. I think it's this one. Hold on one second.
The author of the passage suggests which of the following about widespread assumption.
Yeah. Hold on one second. 11 is. Oops.
Can you go back once to that passage, Steve? I just.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Let me just jump back to the thing here. Oops. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, just.
Let me just move. I'm just going to move the passage up so that we have it near there. Okay. This one's tricky.
Correct. And just give me 1 second more.
Sure. All right, and I do need to cap this.
Is it
Pardon
B,
me?
Steve? B? Is it B?
B is correct. Yeah, B is exactly right. Yeah, good. So it's basically saying, well, okay, this is not actually, it's not right because, we haven't actually, yeah, we haven't actually learned enough. It's like, well, wait a minute. It was actually important to a lot of people, which we haven't really studied enough. If we do study it, we will learn a lot more about this. Okay, it takes us to 11:30 over here, so I'm going to wrap this up. I think we're going to be back to our regular schedule. So yeah, if you're we'll be doing these again 10:30 next week. I believe we'll do a math one, focused on it's going to be focused on word problems, kind of translation between English and math in the quantitative section.
That would be good. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Steve.
All right. Thanks for dropping by, and hopefully see you next week.
Yeah. Same here. Thank you,
Take care.
Steve. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.